We're back now with the latest on the battle against ISIS terrorists as the United States considering expanding airstrikes into Syria. We're joined now by two former CIA officials, CNN national security analyst Bob Baer and Reuel Marc Gerecht. He's a senior fellow with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Bob Baer, I know airstrikes against ISIS targets can punish ISIS, can hurt ISIS, but you can't really defeat ISIS by air alone, right?
No, Wolf, they're putting down roots. It's very clear now. They've set up in Mosul. They've established their own state. They're issuing ID cards. They've been beating the Kurds the last couple days. They're here to stay. And a few airstrikes is precisely what they want. They want to characterize themselves as the enemies of the United States, so that they're not being hurt by this. We have to go beyond that.
In Iraq, Reuel, you can't really defeat ISIS just with the air power. You got to go on the ground. So whether the Iraqi military or the Peshmerga, the Kurdish military, whether they do it, if they can do it, you got to go in there. And the U.S. doesn't want to put boots on the ground, as they say. Somebody's going to have to go and do a ground assault against ISIS.
Well, I think obviously the Kurds can do it within their own domain. They don't have the manpower to go outside of proper Kurdish territory. The Iraqi army obviously now is in no state. After the withdrawal of the American forces, the Iraqi army obviously went into a nosedive. So the Americans are obviously increasing the number of troops there. I don't think the White House is being terribly forthright about that, but you're going to have a lot more troops from somewhere to dislodge them. I think.
But Bob, if you're going to have U.S. troops, boots on the ground forces in Iraq to go after ISIS, so you're going to need a lot more. There are about 1,000 U.S. active duty military personnel in Iraq right now. You're going to need a lot more than that.
You know, with those number of troops, you could go in and make a few strikes against, in Raqqa and things like that, but it's not going to destroy the organization. The problem is, Wolf, you would need thousands and thousands of troops. We'd have to reoccupy big parts of Iraq as well as Syria. And I just don't think the American people are going to stand for it. There's got to be an in-between solution. I'm not quite sure what that is, but the people living in there in ISIS area tell me that this is for the long term. They are establishing a state which is going to be very difficult to destroy.
If the U.S. were, the president's considering this option of launching airstrikes, Reuel, into Syria, not just in Iraq, against ISIS targets in Syria, how much damage would that do to ISIS?
Well, it could do a fair amount. The problem, I think, that in Syria, it's going to take them a long time to really establish sufficient intelligence to go after key targets. They obviously can hit some of the weapon depots and things like that, and that's important. But I think a Syria operation, they've got to be more clever about. And again, I think they need to have troops on the ground.
And you don't have in Syria, Bob, any of the ground support that you have in Iraq. In Iraq, you have some Iraqi military who are with you. You have the Peshmerga, the Kurdish military, with you. In Syria, what do you have?
You have nothing. The Free Syrian Army is not reliable. We have no allies to speak of, zero intelligence on eastern Syria where ISIS is located. And don't forget, Wolf, you have in that country, you've got SA-11 missiles, the same missile system that took down the Malay airliner. So it's going to be a lot more difficult to go in there and protect our forces.
Which raises the question, Reuel, is it totally unrealistic, out of the question for the U.S. to coordinate airstrikes in Syria against the common enemy of Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria, and the common enemy of the U.S., the ISIS forces? Would it be totally absurd to think the U.S. might coordinate airstrikes with the regime in Damascus?
Oh, I suspect the administration knows that cooperation with the Assad regime is pretty precarious. And I don't think they really need to do that if they're going to use it.
But they have good surface-to-air missiles, anti-aircraft systems. U.S. planes, helicopters, they could be in trouble.
They could be, but I think the United States, if the Assad regime were to launch those in fairly quick order, the U.S. Navy would be able to take care of those if they want to do so.
You agree with that, Bob?
I think we would have to respond, yes. But, the problem is with cooperating with Bashar al-Assad, he's a Shia Muslim, essentially, and we would look like we were taking sides in that civil war, which has a lot of downsides. We don't want to get in the middle of this sectarian conflict, and this is why it's such a fine line this administration is walking.
Okay, Bob Baer, Reuel Marc Gerecht. Guys, thanks very much for joining us.